Welcome back to another episode of Provo Paranormal. I'm your host, Maria Rivera, and this episode will be about the old Provo City County Jail, from the viewpoint of one of your fellow students that wishes to remain anonymous and who submitted this story earlier this week.
Why is the unknown so intriguing? What about the paranormal and ghost stories draws us in? It may be the adrenaline rush we get from being scared. It may be that we want to prove ourselves and show others that we are brave. Whatever the reason may be, there continues to be stories of ghosts and possessions. Our story begins at 1776th Street, Buckley Lane. The old Utah County Jail, now demolished, was in operation from 1970 to 1998. It was famously rumored to be haunted. There were stories of people driving by that they would see shadows standing outside of the prison. Others said that they could hear screams coming from the inside. All this made it a fun place to go for teenagers and college students trying to prove their courage to their friends. Unfortunately, I was dumb enough to be one of those teenagers. It was decided that the summer of 2018 was going to be the best summer ever. My friends and I had made several plans to go to Lake Powell, go on all our favorite hikes, and of course go on a lot of dates. I was so excited and could hardly wait to get started. School had just let out, and it was time to get busy. I had always heard about the jail, but never really cared or believed in what people said. I believe in ghosts and all that, but I still consider myself skeptical. People like to exaggerate a lot, and when you're there with a bunch of other people, I'm sure what truly happens gets lost in translation. The number of times I've heard, "I swear I saw something coming at me," or "I heard someone's voice and I thought I was going to die," is ridiculous. A lot of people tend to be overdramatic when recounting their experiences, but I promise you that I wish I was over-exaggerating my story. One night, my friends and I were all sitting around, bored because we had nothing to do. Unfortunately, my friend Marissa is obsessed with all things supernatural and won't ever stop suggesting that we check out the old county jail. This time, we all agreed. There was nothing better to do, and the night was young. We all piled into her car and headed towards Buckley Lane. Marissa was going on and on about how the closer we got, the more eerie she felt. I was not the only one making fun of her, but I was definitely the least scared out of all my friends. Like I said before, I didn't believe all the stories that people told. I believed that there is a possibility that spirits are there, but I wasn't too concerned that they would do anything. My 3 other friends could not relate, but they liked the thrill of being scared. As the jail came into view, the higher the squealing in the car became. It grew more and more difficult for me to recognize the Taylor Swift song that Jessica had put on. Marissa and Jessica were in the front, and Paige and I were in the back. After telling my friends to calm down, I resumed looking out the window. I saw the shadowy building drawing closer and closer with every inch. Even though I hate to admit it, a very unsettling feeling began to grow within me. I chose to ignore it. After all, it was probably just my brain thinking I needed to match the energy of my friends. Finally, we arrive at the ominous building. It was no secret that it was a creepy place, but of course it would be. It's an abandoned jail. That's textbook horror movie idea. We all got out of the car and headed to the main entrance of the jail. I opened the door, worn by time, and contrary to every classic horror movie, the door doesn't make a sound. No creepy creak, just silence. I found that strange, but refused to think much of it. When we entered the jail, I remember a chill running down my spine. It was cold, dark, and quiet. Paige passed out flashlights, and we slowly made our way deeper into the jail. I had other people tell me that the jail was designed to be like a maze, and people could get lost very easily. Unfortunately, I didn't remember this till it was too late. I still had that unsettling feeling, but I kept ignoring it. After all, I had to keep my image of not being afraid of anything. My friends kept giggling and shrieking at things that they claimed they heard, but I didn't hear anything. I could only hear my friends and our footsteps. Beyond that was an abyss of silence. It was intriguing and almost tempting. The more I listened, I discovered that the silence swallowed the sound of my friends giggling and our footsteps. It seemed like the walls of the jail absorbed sound, which is weird because they were concrete. Eventually, we found a hallway with cells lining the walls. The doors were opened, so there was nothing stopping us from going in. More shrieks and laughter came from my friends when we went into the different cells, but I didn't find anything significant about them. They were plain, shabby, and empty. Sure, it was creepy, but of course it would be. It's a jail in the dark. There's no surprise there. We decided that we saw all that we wanted to from the cells and were ready to move on. When we were walking out of the hallway, a certain cell caught my eye. There was something off about it, and I felt a strong pull towards it. The cell's door was left slightly ajar. I had to push it open to see what was inside. It became clear that the cell was not like the others. There was frantic writing all over the room. The floor and walls were covered in scratches that read, "The silence is so loud," and "Shh." This room was colder than the others, so cold that I could see my breath in the air. How come I had never heard about this room before? And why was it so quiet? I felt like I was being drowned in silence. It was at that moment that I realized I couldn't hear the giggles and footsteps of my friends anymore. Then again, I was certain I wouldn't have even been able to hear a fire alarm with how much this place seemed to absorb sound. I quickly left the cell and found that my friends had moved on without me. I did not want to be in this place by myself. Trying not to panic, I went the direction I saw them heading before I got distracted by the cell. After that, it was a guessing game trying to figure out the maze. I tried calling for them. Jess? Marissa? Paige? But as soon as their names passed my lips, they were gone, sucked into the silent void that rested on this place like a fog. I was running through the endless halls, yelling for my friends, with no success. Suddenly, I turned another corner and saw a light at the end of the hallway. Relief washed over me like a wave. I had found my friends at last, and we could get out of there and never come back. I ran to the room and swung open the door with all my might. All of this just to discover that it was empty except one chair in the center of the room, an electric chair. I no longer felt that relief that had just soothed me a minute ago. I remember just being able to look at it and not move. I then remember blinking and a man appearing in the chair. The man was dressed in a prisoner jumpsuit and had shoulder-length, greasy brown hair. He looked to be about 45, and the whites of his eyes were yellow. His face was gaunt and his skin pale. When he appeared, I had never been so frightened in my life, and yet I was still unable to move, or to scream, or do anything. I just had to watch. The man had his wrists strapped to the chair and his head down. All of a sudden, he threw his head back and let out the most blood-curdling scream. Only, I couldn't hear it. Everything about him suggested that he was screaming in great agony, but all I heard was the looming silence. I wanted to run, I wanted to move, but I couldn't. All I could do was stand there and watch. Suddenly I hear a pop and everything went black. Now able to move, I frantically turned my flashlight back on and shined it on the chair. He was gone. With fear guiding every step, I leave the room to make another attempt at escape. This time, instead of finding my friends, I would go back the way I came and try to get out how I came in. I tried to retrace my steps, but my brain was so overcome with horror that it was hard to recognize where I came from and where I was going. I turned another corner and immediately stopped. There was something watching me. I looked all around and couldn't see anything. Even still, I felt eyes staring at me. Someone was lurking in the darkness behind me. I decided to keep moving, but I felt it follow. Turn after turn, I felt it behind me, coming closer and closer. I glanced behind me and something caught my attention. A pair of yellow eyes were watching me from around the corner at the end of the hall. I blink and those same eyes are within inches of my own. My body feels like it's been filled with ice. I realize that those eyes belong to the same man that sat in the electric chair. I will never forget what happened next. A shadowy figure opened his mouth and spoke. In a soft, breathy voice, he said, "Shh, be silent." With all my might, I willed myself to run. I didn't know where I was running to, but I didn't stop. I run till I find something familiar, the first hall of cells. I look in the one with the writing and I see the figure on all fours, frantically scratching at the floor. I suddenly see it in a different cell, scratching at the floor, and then another. Still, I can't hear anything. The silence is deafening. 1 minute the creature is in one place and then it moves to another, but I can't hear it. I collapse to the floor in defeat and terror and just scream. I can't hear my voice echo through the concrete halls. It disappears as soon as it leaves my throat, but I only stop when the burning sensation from screaming becomes too much to bear. How do I get out? I thought to myself. The longer I was in the jail, I felt my sanity slipping like sand through an hourglass. I saw the way we had originally entered and had sprinted for the exit, only to find myself in another part of the jail, with the same feeling of being watched. Tears flooded my eyes as I realized that I couldn't get out. I crumble to the floor again, unable to think of anything else. I just sit on the floor in silence, tears streaming down my face. The last thing I remember were those eyes looking at me from the end of the hallway. The next thing I knew, I woke up in a hospital bed with bandages on my hands. I don't know how I got there, but relief came over me when I saw my parents. They told me that I was in the hospital, but I don't remember getting there. What happened? I asked. They told me that after we got separated, my friends heard me screaming and tried looking for me. When they couldn't find me, they called the police. The officers that came found me in a cell, frantically scratching words on the floor. They also said that when they found me, the whites of my eyes were yellow. Now, 3 years has passed, and people still don't believe my story. Because of what happened to me, I refuse to watch any horror movie or listen to any ghost story. You tend to lose interest when you have actually lived in one. Even to this day, I'll get the feeling of being watched when no one else is around, or I will think I see yellow eyes looking at me from a distance. As you can imagine, I was very happy to hear that they tore the jail down, but I sometimes think, did the ghost go down with it?
Thanks again for tuning in our podcast this week. Please join us next Wednesday to hear another eerie experience here in Utah County.